Hello and welcome everyone. Today we are talking about one of the most challenging problems in critical care, that is fluid management in ARDS. It actually sounds very simple, but give fluids, maintain perfusion, that's what it is. But in ARDS, every decision is a double-edged sword. The lungs want to be dry, the circulation wants to be wet, and that's the paradox we face. The impossibility of the ARDS environment. Here's the core dilemma that we are facing. In ARDS, the alveolar capillary barrier is broken. Now, intravascular volume depletes, the cardiac output drops, and the organs start to fail. So, we reach for fluids. But those very same fluids are going to straight go back and flood the alveoli. You are fixing one problem while you're creating another. So, every intervention has profound consequences. A one-size-fits-all approach isn't adequate and it's at times very dangerous. So to understand why, look at what ARDS actually does at the cellular level. Normally, the glycocalyx and the tight junctions keep fluid out of the alveolar space, and the sodium-potassium ATPase pumps selectively clear any that gets in. However, in ARDS, the inflammatory cascade destroys the glycocalyx and the endothelial matrix. The pumps fail, the lymphatic drainage decreases, and the result is fluid pours from the intravascular space and causes the systemic hypotension and alveolar flooding. And here's a key point: the fluid overload physically stretches the atria also, releasing ANP, which further degrades the glycocalyx. So excess fluid accelerates its own leakage. Now, clinicians historically have divided into two camps, that is a liberal approach or a restrictive approach. The consequences are of a liberal approach is that you will have a good cardiac output, but you will have worsening edema, reduced lung volumes, direct damage to the alveolar capillary barrier, longer ventilation and higher mortality. So then restrictive is the answer, but it's always not the final answer, because though it improves oxygenation, there is fewer ventilator days, there is a real risk of AKI, lactic acidosis and hypoperfusion. The FACT trial survivors showed long-term neurocognitive impairment in stages where they used dry approach. So neither of the extreme is safe. We need to find a middle ground. So that's again we look into the subphenotypes. The landmark FACT trial changed everything. When they applied the latent class analysis, they found that ARDS isn't just one disease. It's two. There is a hypoinflammatory with lower cytokine burden. These patients actually do better with a liberal strategy. Then you have a subphenotype which is hyperinflammatory. So there is a cytokine storm, more damage to the glycocalyx. These patients do better with a restrictive strategy. The same fluid bolus that can save a life in the first case will probably result in worse lungs and mortality in the second case. So let's talk about the mechanics. When an ARDS patient is breathing, simultaneously inflammatory cytokines drive intense respiratory effort. This generates extreme negative pleural pressures. What does that do? It acts as a vacuum. It sucks the fluid into the lungs by increasing the transvascular filtration pressure. Simultaneously, it dramatically increases the venous return and the preload to the right heart, boosting the cardiac output, but there is a danger there. That is called the pendulum phenomenon. Regional pressure shifts during the intense inspiration cause massive lung stress and strain, accelerating what is known as the ventilator-induced lung injury, even before the patient is intubated. Now flip to the ventilated patient. The positive pressure ventilation, especially the PEEP, does the opposite. It makes the pleural fluid positive, pleural pressure positive, which actually reduces the intravascular filtration and halts the edema. That's all good for the lungs. But the point is, this PEEP is going to compress your vena cava, dramatically reduce the vena return and increase the right ventricular afterload, which will cause a drop in the cardiac output. So to compensate, you tend to give more fluids. Now this fluids, because of the lungs is bad, it will reflood the alveoli and probably go into a vicious cycle. So that is a real problem for us. So what are the damages because of the PEEP? The hemodynamic consequences of PEEP extend much beyond the lungs. Look at the numbers. The urine output drops in 34% of the cases. GFR drops by 19%. Renal blood flow decreases 32%. Sodium excretion drops 33%. The mechanism: PEEP causes renal vasoconstriction and activates the RAS system, promoting oliguria and fluid retention. The splanchnic blood flow also takes a dose-dependent hit, especially if the PEEP is as high as 15 to 20. The gut, the liver, they compensate by increasing their oxygen extraction. The good news, however, is that the effects reverse once you take out the PEEP. So how do we actually structure all this, knowing the interaction of various lungs, the ventilator in this setup? Use the ROSE framework, the 4 phases. Resuscitation. This is the phase where we aggressively give fluids and vasopressors. This must be completed as early as possible. Phase 2. This is the most critical phase, that is optimization. Now we have established ventilation, given our fluids and started on vasopressors. We must ensure that the ventilator induced hemodynamic effects are mitigated, and we should do this by minimal fluid and as little damage to the capillary level as much as possible. Next, the stabilization phase, where your hemodynamic is now stabilizing. You try to maintain this, try to keep a neutral balance or a negative balance, slight negative balance. And finally, the phase 4, where you have absolutely settled. Now you can use a lot of diuretics or CRRT to remove the fluids. The main problem that we face is we stay in phase 1 for too long. Mind you, this is extremely wrong. Phase 1 is in hours. In the last video also we have told, phase 1 is in hours, preferably in minutes. It is the optimization phase which is the most important thing, and that has to be the one which has to be sustained for the first 48 hours. So this brings us to the monitoring. How do you monitor? Now CVP is dead, we know that. Let's not go into the detail. It does not tell you how the patient is going to respond. So what we need are obviously the dynamic markers. We know the Frank-Starling curve tells us the story. On the steep portion, it will be fluid responsive, and in the flat, there will be no fluid response. We have different thresholds. We can use them and decide on our fluid strategy. Regarding testing the responsiveness, I don't want to go into very details of this. You can take a screenshot and see what has been shown in this flowchart. Mind you, this is something which we use in our setup. It's not something which we are recommending that everyone should be using. You can make your own protocols, but do have something so that the fluid management in the optimization phase is actually ideal. For fluid responsiveness, the most important tests that we should be doing are the PLR, end expiratory occlusion, and mini fluid challenge. These are the most time tested and confirmed strategies which actually work in ventilated patients. Now, right ventricle is a critical blind spot in ARDS. Now, ARDS frequently causes acute cor pulmonale. High transpulmonary pressures impose severe afterload on the right ventricle, leading to right ventricular dilatation and failure. Now, why does this matter to fluid management? Because in patients with high PEEP and RV failure, increase in PPV after a fluid challenge doesn't actually mean that the patient is fluid responsive. It just means that the right ventricle is afterload dependent. You will chase a fluid false positive and drown the lungs. Now, in this particular case, knowing critical care echo is non-negotiable. Use vexers to look at the venous congestion, look for vena cava variation, look for aortic VTI to track what actually is happening. Do not blindly take the PPV for fluid responsiveness in this particular setup. The active de-resuscitation phase, once the patient is stabilized, resuscitation has to be reversed. The extravascular lung water correlates with pulmonary edema, severity and mortality. Thorough targeted diuresis. If kidneys are already compromised, then go for CRRT. One note is combining albumin with diuretics is a physiologically appealing thing over here for rising the oncotic pressure, but the current evidence doesn't really support it. But it is again something which has been told to be of no benefit. It can be used because it does improve oxygenation also. So what is the new paradigm? Let us close this with the fact that the old question that how much fluid this patient needs is actually the wrong question. In ARDS, we must understand that it's a continuously evolving disease process with the lung mechanics, the vascular permeability and the systemic hemodynamics all intersecting. The lung compliance and the pulmonary pressure constantly redefine what the vascular compartment can safely hold. So, we no longer ask how much, we continuously assess the cardiovascular and the pulmonary axis and ask how much, when, and the last important question, why. That is fluid stewardship. Thank you for your patience, and if you find our videos helpful, please like, share and subscribe to our channel.